Among all the tragic millions whose personal worlds were wrecked by the war and its aftermath, the most helpless as well as the most innocent were the young. In Europe alone, hundreds of thousands of children were either orphaned entirely or separated from home and family to wander alone and unwanted, in many cases not knowing who they were or where they came from. To repair at least some of the terrible damage wrought upon Europe's oncoming generation, many people and many organizations are at work. They range all the way from the United Nations, which operates medical clinics and food distribution centers all over Europe, down through the bigger religious groups to smaller independent organizations and even individuals. Those who operate these projects, great or small, must often look for support to the nation which in recent years has been most accustomed to big-scale giving. One whose work on behalf of Europe's lost children brings him often to the United States these days is an energetic Irish priest, Monsignor John Patrick Carroll Abbing, who has lived most of his career in Italy, and who, during the Italian campaign, became well known among American GIs.
I have a message for you from Carlo.
Carlo? Oh, Carlo, the little shoeshine boy in Naples.
Yes. He's with us in a little village near Rome. We run for homeless boys like him. We call it the Boys' Republic. And here is Carlo's picture. He wanted you to see it. He's rather proud of it.
That's the little street ride I was telling you about, the one our company adopted.
Between 1943 and 45, as Allied forces slowly fought their way up the Italian peninsula, there were left, as part of the pitiful residue of battle, hundreds of thousands of lost children, homeless and hungry. These soon found that American soldiers could be counted on for easy handouts. Some even succeeded in attaching themselves more or less permanently to GIs or to Army units. The Army did what it could to lighten their misery, but this was not the Army's job, and it was too much of a task to cope with successfully while fighting a war. Gravest problem were Italy's wild youngsters, roaming the land aimlessly, living by their wits. They flocked to the areas where GIs were most plentiful. Shining shoes for a living with sidelines ranging from thievery to dope peddling, they provided a theme for the memorable Italian film Shoeshine, which told the story of Italy's lost children of the war. The ports through which American munitions and supplies were being funneled into Italy were their favorite fields of operation. Boy gang supply dumps, stealing whatever was at hand and turning it over to the black market. In time, so much was being looted that U.S. supply offices were seriously alarmed. At the Army's suggestion, Monsignor Carroll Abbing opened up in Rome a cellar refuge for homeless boys, which he called Shoeshine Hotel, and which was supported almost entirely by GI contributions. Convinced of the urgency of his work, the Monsignor of the Shoeshine Boys, as he was cut in 1946, a bombed-out villa near Rome. He and another priest, Don Antonio Rivolta, planned to rebuild the place along lines they both advocated and which Don Rivolta had already tested, to make of it a self-governing, non-sectarian boys' community, a kind of Shoeshine Republic. With the voluntary help of the boys themselves, they set to work on the job of restoration. But the project proved far beyond their resources. So to New York went the Monsignor to lay his plans before American Relief for Italy and its president, Judge Juvenal Marchisio.
Well, $500,000 is a lot of money to raise for a project like this.
Of course, I couldn't hope to have it all at once. A little this year, a little more next year, and gradually we have it all built.
You'd better plan to go ahead with the village. We think we can raise the money for you.
The response from the American people was quick and generous. With American dollars plus contributions of the Italian government in materials and labor, the Boys' Republic began growing. And in time, 4 other boys' towns were started in different parts of Italy. Altogether, they house today some 2,000 boys, and they have given help to nearly 20,000 others. Chief among them is still the original Boys' Republic at Santa Marinella, a federation of 3 such boys' villages. Here, homeless youngsters born under the shadows of fascism and war live in security and independence as citizens of a community in which they earn their own way and make their own laws. Their assembly meets daily, and the mayor and his board of assessors are elected each month. No law is valid until it has been debated in assembly and passed by majority vote, as in American town meeting. According to the kind of job he prefers, each citizen lives and works in one of the Republic's 3 communities: the fishing village, the industrial village, or the agricultural village. So long as he stays at the Republic, he must share in the work. But he may leave at any time, for all the boys' citizens came there of their own free will. Like Carlo, a shoeshine boy and ex-GI mascot, who showed up one day in 1946, fresh from the streets of Rome, to look the place over. In his short, hard-bitten existence, Carlo had learned never to trust anyone. But at Santa Marinella, he met the first friendly adults he had encountered since the GIs left Italy. A newcomer to the Boys' Republic is allowed a week as guest, in which to decide whether or not he will stay. A boy who has been on his own almost as far back as he can remember, and who has been answerable to nobody, is naturally suspicious of law and order. But for the first time in years, Carlo found he had a bed he could call his own, with nobody coming along to throw him out. The fact that all citizens of the Boys' Republic are expected to go to school is unwelcome to most new arrivals. Though they may secretly envy those who can read and write, they often take the attitude that school is kid stuff for persons of their worldly experience. But going to school is an accepted occupation at the Republic, and boys draw pay for it, just as they draw pay for helping to provide what services the community requires or for working at some industrial job. In well-equipped machine shops, boys can learn such trades as carpentry or cabinet making, while turning out the furniture and equipment the Republic uses. They also learn to make toys, and today make all the shoes worn by the citizens of the Republic. Pay for these and the many other available jobs is in merits, up to 30 a day, of which 9 go for board and keep. Surplus merits can be converted into Italian lira at the village bank and deposited. Or they may be agreeably squandered at the village store. The process of adjustment to the community, of learning to assume such simple responsibilities as making one's own bed, is seldom easy for boys who have never known any kind of discipline. And it takes time for them to learn that evading, lying, and blustering will no longer work. Like any other child, Carlo needed to win the acceptance and approval of those around him. But he was slow to realize that in order to do so, he had to take his share of responsibility. The staff psychologist at Santa Marinella gives all newcomers a personality appraisal and a series of aptitude tests. On the results of these, and with due respect for his own inclination, each boy is assigned to some job in the community. Carlo, working with clay in the pottery shop, began to feel something he had never known before, a desire to create. With it came a pride in his own achievement. When a newcomer first begins to identify himself with the community to citizenship,
mettiti a sedere, Carlo. Vuoi parlarmi?
Sì. Voi sapete che cosa so fare io. So fare molti soldi a Roma. Potete domandare a chi volete lì alla stazione.
Tu ci ritorni lì?
No, è quello che vi volevo dire.
Sono proprio contento, Carlo.
Credo che ci rimarrò. Beh, arrivederci.
Arrivederci, Carlo.
new boy citizens often try to win prestige and establish position in the community through the only means they know, a show of strength. Hampered by deep feelings of having been rejected, Carlo are often clumsy at making friends. For all their desire to do so, they cannot readily find their way within the circle of community life. The primary contribution of a community like the Boys' Republic is to give to those who have always felt themselves outcasts a sense of belonging at last to some group, a substitute for the lost family. Inevitably, Carlo's desire for affection came to center around the one man who, since the departure of his GI friends, could serve as surrogate for his lost father. And when, in the first spontaneous gesture of affection he had ever felt moved to make, Carlo found that others were already ahead of him, sharing possession of the love he sought for himself alone, his old sense of rejection swept over him. Though still emotionally adrift, Carlo found some compensation in his work, for he had become one of the most skillful potters in the shop. As time went on and he found he could win by this means the prestige he had failed to gain in other ways, it became overwhelmingly important to him to stay on top. So when the instructor held up as an example the work of another boy, Carlo's reaction was to eliminate his rival by a symbolic act. For the community, the Boys' Republic has its legal code and a duly elected court ready to administer it. The lesson that a member of any community is bound to accept its restrictions and penalties as well as its benefits is not an easy one for boys whose childhood has been warped, as Carlo's was. When Carlo heard the sentence of the court, his rage and self-pity broke out in the form of defiance.
E che mi importa? Io non accetto mica.
To Carlo's young mind, the only way to escape what he feared most, rejection by the community, was to reject the community himself, to make the boys sorry by walking out on them and the Republic. That he was leaving behind the only home he knew, the only people he had ever wanted as friends, Carlo was at first too resentful to admit. As his anger subsided, there began for Carlo the slow, difficult process of realization that his weeks at the Republic had bound him to the ordered society of men, beyond the ability or desire to escape. For in the only community which had offered him a chance to live, he had learned what so many have learned before him, the depth and intensity of the need, of everyone's need, to belong. Time marches on.